You guys, it is officially the end of the year, which means it's time for us to sit down and go over every single book that we've read this year. We did do a part 1 of this video earlier in the year where we covered everything we read from January to July, so make sure to go watch that part 1 before you watch this, because this is basically all the books that we've read since that point. So July to December, we have them here on the cards. That's why we're so pushed back, so you can see all the books.
We're going to keep it the same as last time. We're just going to go over the books really quickly and let you know what we thought about them and then move on, because there is a lot to get to.
We did have a really good reading year though. We were both able to hit our reading goals. You actually went over and we both read about 95 books. So today we're just gonna go through all of them.
Let's get her done.
Let's get her done.
First up, I have It's Not Summer Without You by Jenny Han. I did end up reading this before season 2 came out, and I'm actually really happy that I did that because I feel like I got a little sneak peek before season 2 came out, and I was able to imagine everything go down with the characters that we already know. It was really fun comparing the book and the TV show and seeing what a great job they did. I'm in love with the book series, I'm in love with the book characters, but I'm also in love with the television series and those characters. I will definitely be reading that 3rd book before the 3rd season comes out as well.
So up first for me, I have I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This was her memoir that was super huge last year. In this memoir, she covers what it was like to be a former child actor, how she dealt with eating disorders, addiction, and the relationship she had with her mother. It was a super heartbreaking read, but I thought it was done so well. She was able to include a lot of humor throughout the book and in the writing, which I really enjoyed. And I can see why everyone was raving about this book last year. So I really enjoyed it. I didn't rate it because it was a memoir, but I do recommend if you haven't read it yet.
Up next, I do have Defy Me, and I also read Reveal Me, which is the novella, but I don't own it. This series is a YA fantasy dystopian where we're following our main character, Juliet, and she has a lethal touch. So anybody who touches her for too long is gonna die. The concept is crazy, the series is crazy, but I think this is where I started to realize that I really enjoyed the first 3 books in the series a lot more than what's starting to happen here. I think things started getting a little bit too chaotic for my liking, and I remember at this point I was just ready to see how the series is going to end and just wrap it all up.
Up next, I have My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. In this book, we are following Gretchen and Abby. They are childhood best friends since the 4th grade, and we watch them as they grow up and come face to face with evil itself. I liked this one. It was a gross and unsettling horror novel, but if anything, I think I was more sad. That's something I've recently realized. I don't like exorcism books or like possession books because I just end up being sad the whole time reading about the character, but I did like this one. I do love Grady Hendrix writing. It just wasn't my favorite of his.
So up next, I do have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I really loved it. It honestly felt like a Grey's Anatomy episode because we are following 2 doctors and they kind of get off on the wrong foot, and then they form this really cute and genuine relationship. There was forced proximity, there was fake dating, there was family drama, and I love all of those tropes. But I also do love that Abby Jimenez did cover some heavier topics, like our main male character and his struggles with anxiety. I feel like a lot of times in romance books, we don't always get to see that kind of representation, especially coming from a man. So it was just kind of refreshing to read about that. And I have noticed, like with Abby Jimenez books, I really do like that she writes a lot of heavier romances that aren't just like sappy the whole time. They cover like real topics, and I like that. This one I gave 4 stars.
So up next, we actually both read this book this year, and it is The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. This is a domestic thriller where there's a woman named Sarah. She's an attorney, and she basically has to defend her husband who is accused of murdering his mistress. I did like it. I thought it was a little bit predictable, and that's why I think it was an overhyped book this year, but it was a fun one.
Yeah, definitely. I remember actually really enjoying the narrator on the audiobook. I thought she did such a great job. But yeah, I was able to guess the big twist and reveal very early on, and I kind of was just hoping that the author was going to go in a different route. But I know this one is becoming an adaptation, so I'm really excited to see how it's going to play out on film. Up next, I do have Hidden Pictures by Jason Recolak. This is a horror mystery thriller, and we're following our main character who just got a dream nannying job, and everything is going well until she starts to suspect that this 6-year-old's imaginary friend might actually be real. I thought the story was very entertaining, and I did love seeing the little spooky, creepy pictures all throughout the story. I think for me though, things kind of took a turn, and I was enjoying like the whole sinister plot, and then when things started to become a little bit more of like a mystery and psychological, that's where I was kind of losing my interest. So I want a good horror book, so if you know of one, let me know.
So up next, I have Dolly Alderton's Everything I Know About Love. This was one of her memoirs, and this is basically a recollection of her early 20s. So she's telling us different stories about bad dates, heartbreak, life advice, things like that. There was a bunch of quotes and life lessons that I really loved in this book, so I highly recommend.
Up next, I do have The Passengers by John Mars, and this one is a crazy ride. It is a mystery thriller. We're following 8 people who have had their cars hijacked, and they're all on this like crash course unless a jury and social media can decide who they think should be the one to live. The concept was really interesting, and it did remind me of a Black Mirror episode. The story was entertaining and it was fast-paced, so I did enjoy it for that, but I do feel like there was a lot of information being thrown at us because we are following 8 different characters. So sometimes I was getting a little bit confused, but the plot twist was really good. So I'm interested in reading more from John Mars.
So up next, I have Bully by Penelope Douglas. This is book 1 in the Fall Away series. And in this book, we're following Jared and Tatum. They grew up as childhood best friends, but all of a sudden, Jared decides to act different, and he is hell-bent on making Tate's life a living hell. I really enjoyed this read. I know this one isn't as talked about as some of the other Penelope Douglas books, but I don't know why. For me, I thought this was like a really approachable and easily digestible book, which Penelope Douglas doesn't have much of those in my opinion, so I don't know why this one isn't talked about more. But I thought the romance was so cute. I was eating everything up. There's like a lot of tension. You want to know like what's making Jared act this way. And I thought it was a really fun ride. I do want to read more books in this series. I don't know if it continues to follow them or other people, but I had a really fun time with this one.
Up next, I have Imagine Me and Believe Me, which were the final books in the Shatter Me series. And this was like the final book. The Believe Me, that was like the final novella, and I was so mad because after I read this, it just didn't feel like the goodbye that I needed and wanted with this series. So I had to read that final novella, and that made me feel a lot better. It was the closure that I needed, but I just don't think that's right.
Right, because what if some people don't know to read that one?
Exactly, and I didn't even know about the novellas until like later on in the series, so it really bothered me. I'm gonna stick by my opinion that the first 3 books in the series were so worth it. I don't know what started happening after that though. I think the series was great overall, but especially those first 3 books.
Up next, I have Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. This was a fun summer rom-com. In this, we have a working class bad boy townie, and we have a rich, popular local girl. I do think this was a cute summer read. However, I did not like it as much as I liked her Off-Campus Bride You series, so I don't know if I would continue reading this Avalon Bay.
Up next, we do have Happy Place by Emily Henry. This was a Literal Besties book club book, and it was so much fun reading it with you guys. So in this one, we're following a couple who broke up a while ago, and now they're pretending to still be together for the sake of their friends and their annual vacation trip together. I honestly don't have a good track record with Emily Henry books, but honestly, this is probably my favorite of all of the ones that I've read. I find myself really liking the characters that she writes. I think she does a good job of writing humor and romance. But I think my thing is I never like the tropes that she writes because it comes back to miscommunication, and that's my own personal problem. But I think Emily Henry is great.
I do think her writing I have to be in the mood for, but this book really made me appreciate the writing. I really enjoyed how she wrote about friendships in this book, and I found the storyline to be like relatable and realistic, so I like this one. Up next, I have The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This is a murder mystery novel where a young caretaker gets assigned to work for a lady who was accused of murdering her entire family. This was spooky, it was eerie, there was twists I couldn't predict, and the story kept me engaged the whole time. So, can't get mad at it. I think I gave it like a 4.5, which is a perfect rating in my opinion.
Next, I do have Peck of the Moon by Kristen Higgins. This is such a heart-wrenching, powerful love story. A woman leaves her husband with a note with a task every month to help him face his first year without her. And it was really just a great story about grief, love, and accepting loss. It was really emotional watching our main character kind of go through this transition and try and embrace life again. But I think the story was really good. And if that's something that you'd be interested in, I think you would really like this book.
Okay, so this next one, you guys, was Credence by Penelope Douglas. Earlier I said that Bully by this author was approachable and digestible. That is not 2 words that I would use to describe this book. Quite the opposite, actually. I know this is the book that kind of turns people away from this author because of the crazy tropes. In this story, we have a 17-year-old girl who suddenly becomes orphaned, and she has to stay with her estranged uncle and ends up moving to Colorado in this secluded place with her step-uncle and her step-cousins. Do with that what you will. I honestly did not know what to expect going into this. I didn't know if I was gonna like it. Most of the way through, I was still unsure, but then something about this author's writing just like has me in its grip. I don't know how else to explain it. The writing made me understand. I'm not going to try to defend myself, but I did give it a 4.25.
Up next, I have Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. Y'all already know. You're so tired of hearing us talk about it, but I'm bringing it with us to next year too, because I haven't finished the series. But this is a YA dystopian where basically the only way you can die is if a scythe picks you to die, but it's so much more than that. I'm just giving you a little something. Each book has ended on such a cliffhanger that has me so ready to read the next one. So I'm so ready to read that next book next year, probably in January.
So up next, I have A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. In this one, we follow 3 residents of a secluded, seemingly peaceful commune who end up investigating the disappearances of 2 outsiders. I liked this book. I wish I would have personally known the plot before going into it. I did go into it completely blind, and I don't love commune type settings. I've known that from previous books, so that's my fault for not knowing that that's what this was about. Regardless of that though, I did really enjoy the storyline. There's scenes in here that I actually still think about. Like, I just retained a lot of the story, which I can't say about some of these other books. So I did really enjoy the writing. I would be interested in reading more by this author. I just didn't personally love this setting.
So I do have A Long Way Down by Krista and Becca Ritchie, another one you guys are so tired of hearing us talk about. This one was also bittersweet because it is the last book of my favorite couple in this whole series. I wasn't expecting like this huge time jump we got out of nowhere. So this is another one where it's like after I read this one, I'm like, okay, we gotta wrap it up.
Up next, I have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This was like a YA fantasy type of read. In this story, we're following 19-year-old Sigma. She has been an orphan since she's been a baby and has had a string of guardians who have all met an untimely death. And then she's invited to stay at her remaining relative's home where things are not all as they seem. I did enjoy this book. I loved that death itself was a character. However, there was something in the story that was just lacking for me. I couldn't pinpoint it. Overall, I did like this book. I just didn't love it as much as I thought I would.
Up next, I do have Mile High by Liz Tomforty. This is one of my favorite romance books of the year. This is an enemies to lovers forbidden hockey romance. We're following a professional hockey player and we're also following a flight attendant, which is so cute. I did like that this one was a grown-up sports romance. I feel like all the sports romance I read are always college sports romances. So it was kind of refreshing being in the adult point of view, but also dealing with sports. Stevie and Xander's had such a unique and fun banter though. I know they will forever be one of my favorite romance stories. I gave this one a 4.5.
So up next, we both have His and Hers by Alice Feeney. This was another book club book, and this was a mystery thriller where a murder happens and reporter Anna is reluctant to cover the case. Detective Jack becomes suspicious of her involvement until he himself becomes one of the suspects in his own murder investigation. You guys have heard us talk about this one a lot recently, but we thought it was an interesting story. However, it was not our favorite Alice Feeney book.
I thought the twist was really good, but I just don't think I liked anyone in this book, so it was hard for me to want to pick it up and read the story. So yeah, it definitely wasn't my favorite Alice Feeney book. Up next, I have Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood, another STEM romance from Ali Hazelwood, and honestly, I did enjoy the love hypothesis more than this one. I feel like in this story, we got a whole bunch of scientific information that I just didn't know what they were talking about, and it kept bringing me out of the story. I think nothing can compare to that first Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. That one was just so good that now I'm just comparing all of her other STEM romances to that one. But I'm so ready to read her fantasy debut novel next year.
Up next, I have Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. In this one, we're following a girl named Sawyer who is on the run. She ends up meeting this guy named Enzo and stealing his identity. He basically wants revenge, but as he's trying to get it, they end up stranded on an island together where they have to stay in a lighthouse with an old creepy caretaker. This book was a wild ride. I would consider this one a little bit of a darker romance. There's a lot of weird themes and it kind of gets suspenseful and thrillery at the end. I'm so happy I got to read it this year though. I was gifted this copy from Nikki, so thank you so much for sending it to me.
Up next, I do have If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. This is a YA story that explores the complexities of friendship and love through 2 childhood best friends, Autumn and Finney. This story really had me so locked in. I felt like I was right there with these characters and like I was best friends with them and I was watching this whole story go down, and I will definitely be reading Finney's point of view when that comes out next year.
So coming right off of Does It Hurt, I up next have The Cat and Mouse Duet by the same author, H.D. Carlton, Haunting and Hunting Adeline. These are dark romances. Book 1 is a stalker romance, and then book 2 continues the story, but it gets significantly darker and talks about dark, disturbing topics. I always make sure to emphasize that fact so you could check content warnings if you need to, especially for this series, but I did really enjoy it. It was heartbreaking and intense, but I do want to read anything else that that H.G. Carlton comes up with, and I know she's coming off with a spin-off book that is going to be about a character that we kind of met throughout these two books. So I'm so excited for that next year.
Yeah, up next I have The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. I think at this point we're all tired of hearing me talk about how much of a disappointment this book was to me, and I really don't want to go too much into it again. If you haven't already heard us talk about our worst books of 2023, we did do a video of that. But that's how I feel, and I am really happy to never talk about this book ever again.
Oh my god! Actually, following after The Cat and Mouse Duet, I had this little novella, Satan's Affair by H.G. Carlton. I should have just included it with those two, but it's fine. This was a super dark, gory little thriller book. It follows a super interesting character. It is reverse harem, and it was like a really fun book to read around spooky season. I do think this could be read as like a standalone novella, but if you do want to read The Cat and Mouse Duet, I would recommend reading this before you read those two.
Up next, I do have Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez, which was another one of my favorite romances this year. And this one we're following Vanessa, who is a travel blogger, but she also has a high risk of getting a disease called ALS. And that disease has taken a lot of the women in her family's lives before they even got the chance to turn 30. So this goes back to what I said earlier about how I like that Abby Jimenez includes heavier topics in her books that just seem more real life than just like a sappy romance book. Another great Abby Jimenez book. I did notice I went way out of order in this series, so I still have the first one to read. So I'm gonna read that next year.
Up next, we have this blue book here, and it is I Killed Zoe Spanos by Kit Frick. This is a YA mystery where two teenagers are linked when one confesses to a murder and the other tries to figure out what actually happened. We always say that YA mystery thrillers just somehow do it better, and I stick with that. This was such a fun mystery to watch unravel, and they use a podcast platform as part of the storytelling, so listening to the audiobook was really cool because they have like a lot of cool effects and different things I just added to the reading experience. This was such a fun book. I gave it a 4.5, which is another perfect read. The pacing, the storyline, and the ending were all amazing, so I highly recommend, especially if you're looking for like a YA mystery thriller that's a fast-paced read.
Up next, I do have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This one actually was recommended to me a lot by you guys because you knew I did not like second chance romance books, and this is actually one of the very few second chance romance books that I did enjoy. It was just so painful and so real. The story does cover a broken marriage and just how they're gonna try and repair that. It definitely is more of a grown adult romance story, and I think that's why I liked it, because there wasn't something simple as just miscommunication. There was like really deeper, darker things that happened. So I think that's why I like this one, but I'll definitely be reading that next book that Kennedy Ryan's coming out with next year.
Up next, I have Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. This is book 2 in the Magnolia Parks universe. In this one, we're following Daisy, who was raised by her gang lord brother, and things become difficult when she falls for emotionally unavailable Christian who is in love with his best friend's girlfriend, Magnolia Parks. Drama! You guys know we were not a huge fan of the first book, Magnolia Parks, but I'm so glad I decided to pick this one up because it redeemed the series for me. This one was just significantly better in my opinion. It does have a lot of the drama that book 1 had. I just thought it was done a lot better in this book. I think it just comes down to me liking this plot better. I know I want to continue with the Daisy Hate storyline. I don't know if I'm gonna go back and read like the Magnolia Parks books.
Next, I have Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. This is the second book in the Knock 'Em Out series. I definitely know that I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first one. I didn't really feel a connection with this romance. It kind of felt all over the place to me because it was like a slow burn, but they also had like insta lust, which was just too much, and it didn't need to be this long of a book. But I still need to read that third book.
So up next, I have What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. 22 years after Naomi survives a stabbing attack, she expects to find closure when the man that she put behind bars dies in prison. But as she returns to the town, secrets are uncovered and not everything is what it seems. This was one of my favorite mystery thrillers of the year. I gave it a 4.5. I couldn't predict anything, and it was twist after twist. So this was a really highly rated book out of all of mine this year.
So I did read the Selection Stories novella and The Elite. So I continued on with the Selection series, and I really enjoyed it, but I did enjoy that first one a lot more. I think in this one, I'm just waiting for our girl to figure out which man to pick because I've already picked. So I'm waiting for her to realize who it's gonna be. But I also really did like the novella because it definitely gave me a lot more background information that the reader needed.
Now we're getting into why Penelope Douglas was my most read author of the year. I couldn't stop reading their books. So up next, I have books 1 and 2 in the Devil's Night series, Corrupt and Hideaway. And I don't know why I'm surprised. I didn't know how I was gonna feel about this series, but I should have because I've loved every other other Penelope Douglas book I read. Corrupt follows the stories of Michael and Erica as their worlds collide again after one fateful night in high school. However, now Michael and his friend want revenge on Erica, so that makes for an interesting dynamic. Book 2 follows a different couple. This is more of a suspense type of romance book because there's like a threat looming the entire time. This book though did have one of my favorite characters of the year, Banks, and the entire book was a roller coaster. So I'm so excited to finish this series. I gave both of these 4 stars.
Up next, I do have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a science fiction story following a mysterious Area X and the people who are going there to explore it. I did end up watching the movie before I read this one, and I'm so glad that I did because I think if I just read this, I would have been so confused. I think with science fiction, I need like extra hand-holding. So I think because I just watched the movie before I read this, I got that hand-holding and I knew like exactly what they were describing. But what a crazy concept. I think it's really interesting though, so highly recommend.
Up next, I have Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is a mystery thriller where a mom witnesses her son murder a man in cold blood and then has the opportunity to stop the event before it happens. So every day she wakes up, she's transported to one day in the past, and the story is told backwards that way. I thought it was such an interesting concept. I loved this book. I gave it a 4.75, which is the highest rated mystery thriller book that I read ever, I think. And I'm so sad because I forgot to include it in our favorites video, but it should have been there because this is my highest rated mystery book.
Up next, I do have Say You Swear by Megan Brandy, and this one we are following a group of friends that have become so close that they're basically like family now. They've gone through school together and now they're about to start college together. I'll be honest and say I wasn't completely into it in like the first half. The second half was like a completely different author. The last 30% I was not emotionally prepared for what we were put through. It was definitely a roller coaster of emotions, but it ended so perfectly, so good. And I did notice that this author said this took her years to write, so maybe that's why I started to like it a little bit more towards the end.
Up next, we both have Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, another book club book. You guys already know this was a super popular romantasy book this year about 2 young rival journalists who find their love through a magical connection. I thought this was a super cozy, warm read with really poetic writing. I liked this book, but I know it was a lot of people's favorite books of all time, and I did not enjoy it, I don't think, as much as everyone else did.
I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my favorite thing ever. If anything, I'm waiting for that second book to really know how I feel about this series. But the writing was beautiful and I did enjoy the characters. I have Anxious People by Frederick Beckman. Another one I'm so happy I don't ever have to talk about again after this. I really didn't enjoy it and I did include it in the 23 worst books of the year for me.
So up next, I have Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. In this book, we have 2 sisters, one brutal murder, and then a quest for vengeance that unleashes hell itself. This was a gothic, witchy mystery thriller that I did enjoy. There was something lacking for me in this one. I didn't love it as much as everyone else did.
Up next, I have The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. I loved being back in this Halloween towny kind of environment. This was the second book in the X-Hex series, and I really hope Erin Sterling continues on with the series.
Me too.
I think they're just perfect spooky romances to read in October.
Up next, I have Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. I read this my birthday month. It was very fitting. You got this for me. And this trope was boyfriends father. And I mean, hey, Penelope Douglas is just known for pushing the envelope and writing things outside the box. We're not getting romances like this, but I really appreciate them. I think they're so fun. It's one of those things you can't take too literally. You just gotta strap in and enjoy the ride. See how it plays out. If you're able to do that, I think you'd really enjoy their writing. I always find them so entertaining. This one though, I will say, wasn't my favorite out of the other ones that I read.
Up next, I do have House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This is actually a really good YA horror book. Iris and her sisters are very strange ever since they disappeared a long time ago when they were children, and then they ended up coming back a few months later with no recollection of what happened to them. This really was unlike anything I've read before, and I really liked the spooky, eerie vibes. It was crazy learning about everything that these sisters went through. I don't normally reread books, but I think if I were going to reread one, it would probably be this one, especially now that I know like everything that's happened to them.
Up next, I have the first 2 books in the Dark Side series by Christy Cunning. Both books are in one physical copy, and this is a paranormal / supernatural reverse harem story with a really fun plot. We're following a ghost girl who has been living with a group of 4 supernatural men for the past 5 years, and she is trying to remember who she is and why she's there. This is just like a really fun book. I don't know how else to describe it. I can't come up with a better word. It's just fun and entertaining. I do want to finish this series in the new year.
Up next, I have As Good as Dead and Killjoy by Holly Jackson. This was actually the last book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. Honestly, this was my least favorite of the series, but I still really did enjoy it. This was another bittersweet one to just say goodbye to Pip and Ravi. And then it was also bittersweet reading that final novella because it was actually starting from the very beginning so we could understand what really got Pip into investigating. Overall, I think the series is really good and I can't wait to watch the adaptation.
Up next, I have Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. In this one, a reporter returns to her hometown as she works to uncover the truth about violent crimes happening, but as she's there, she finds herself forced to unravel the puzzle that is her own past. This was super dark and a little bit disturbing, but I will say it was twisty and I couldn't predict the ending, so I do really want to see the TV adaptation.
Up next, we have The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Nikki actually did gift us these, so thank you again very much. This YA series really took over this year, and rightfully so. I did read The Inheritance Games, didn't love it as much as I'm loving this series so far, so it's already proved itself to me.
In this one, a girl is recruited by the FBI to join a group of other teenagers who work on cold cases, and I really appreciate how each book in the series kind of follows its own mystery, so each book has a nice conclusion, but then there's still a little something to like string you on to want to read the rest of the series. We also both have The House by Christina Lauren. This was a fun like YA spooky, almost horror book, but it also had a romance in it, so you gotta kind of love it. In this one, we're following Delilah. She returns to her hometown where she's reacquainted with her longtime crush, but he kind of lives in the haunted house of the town, and as they start to form a connection, something in the house does not want them to be together, so it's kind of spooky and creepy and eerie, but it's also super sweet watching their love kind of form as well. I don't know why this one isn't talked about more.
I know, I love this one so much. It's definitely one of their underdogs. Up next, I have Tell Me Three Things by Julie Buxbaum. This is a cute YA contemporary romance. We're following a young girl who has to move to her dad's house and she's gonna start this new school because her mom just passed away. I did go into this blindly and I just wasn't expecting that. It was a really good story. I loved reading all about the young drama, and there was also a anonymous love interest that we find out in the end who it is, and it was just perfect. Such a cute YA story.
Up next, I have Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. In this one, we are following a girl named Audrey as she's trying to find who is harvesting and killing women in London. This is another one that's like a gothic setting mystery thriller. I will say though, this one was just a little too graphic and descriptive for me. I get really grossed out with that type of thing, and the ending I just didn't think was satisfying enough. I know I'm kind of hating on a lot of these, but this one was not my favorite. If anything, I did like Kingdom of the Wicked more.
Up next, I do have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and this is such a cozy, heartwarming book. There's the grumpy sunshine romance trope, there's the found family, and there's lots of magical potions, so it just makes for the perfect spooky book to read in October.
Moving along, the next one I have is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This one was a huge romantasy book this year as well, and it's known for its unique magic systems, as it should be. It was really interesting to read about. In this world, magic stems from these magic playing cards, and anyone can use these cards and access its special abilities. It made for a really interesting read. Here's the thing, I don't think I absorbed a lot of this book. I don't know if it's just because I rushed through it, but I know that I really liked it. I had already bought the sequel. I do want to read it next year, but I might have to revisit this story because I don't want to forget anything. I do remember it ending pretty crazy though.
Up next, I do have Roxy by Neil Shusterman and Jared Shusterman. In this one, we are following drugs as personified characters, and they're all in a competition to see who can be the most lethal. The concept of that is crazy. Of course, it comes from the mind of Neil Shusterman and Jared Shusterman. I really liked the story, but I think for me, I just couldn't connect to a lot of it because there was a lot of drugs that they were talking about and they had different nicknames, and so I couldn't understand who or what was being represented. So I think there is a right audience for this, but maybe it just wasn't me.
Up next, I have another mystery thriller. It is The Shadows by Alex North, and this is a psychological thriller about lucid dreams that end in murder. So interesting. And Alex North, something about his concepts in books I'm obsessed with. I really love The Whisper Man by him, and this one was no different. Both of the books that I've read by him already have a super like dream-like paranormal aspect with a really satisfying ending, so I will continue to read this author. I enjoyed this one, but I think I like The Whisper Man a little bit more.
Up next, I do have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, and I actually find myself thinking about this book a lot because I really enjoyed it. We're following a teenager who has to deal with the consequences when he accidentally summons the ghost of Julian Diaz, who is the residential school bad boy, and this kid can't get rid of Julian. The main characters in the setting really did make for such a comfort read for me, and I really wasn't expecting that. It was so cute, so sweet, just a perfect YA book, and I know Julian's point of view story is coming out next year, and I'll definitely be reading that.
Up next is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is book 1 in the ACOTAR spin-off series, and we're following favorite sister Nesta as she deals with grief, trauma, and her journey to self-discovery. This is essentially a redemption story, and honestly probably my favorite book in this ACOTAR world. It was just a really beautiful, moving story with a lot of different themes and messages, so I really appreciated it. I love Nesta now. I can't wait for the other books in the spin-off.
Up next I have Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Such a good YA mystery thriller book. I do find it interesting though because I did enjoy the second half a lot more than the first half, and that's exactly how I felt about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, who is also by V.E. Schwab. But I really did enjoy the way that the story wrapped up, and I will be reading more from this author.
Up next, we both had read Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murders by Jessie Q. Satanto, and this was a cozy mystery about an elderly woman who has her own tea shop and one day finds a dead man there and sets out to uncover what actually happened. This was another book club book. We had a really good time with it. It was our first like cozy mystery read, and I enjoyed it. I also liked that there was like a found family and a lot of humor throughout the book.
Up next, I do have The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This was a solid mystery book, but this was definitely another one where I felt like I was getting less and less interested as the plot became less and less sinister. I liked the idea of it. I think it was a solid story, but there was just some kind of disconnect there. But the narrator for the audiobook was really good.
Up next, I have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I absolutely adored this book. We're following Piranesi himself. He's like this really sweet, innocent man who is navigating his way through a world that is unlike our own. It's very dreamlike. I know that's something that they used to describe this book, and it definitely was the case. And the whole story is told throughout Piranesi's research notes, so I love that. I thought it was so good. The ending I was not expecting definitely took a turn. I really appreciate this book for what it is. The only reason I didn't give it a higher rating, I gave it a 3.5, was because I wasn't really hooked until the very end. I did think it was a really magical read though, and I loved it.
Up next, I have Britney Spears' memoir, The Woman in Me. I absolutely loved this. I don't know if this was the only memoir I read, but it was definitely my favorite memoir of the year that I read. I'm just so happy that Britney finally found her voice and she was able to expose some of the horrible things that her horrible family put her through. And I just thought it was a really great memoir overall.
Up next, I have one of the biggest sequels to the biggest book of the year, and that is Iron Flame, the sequel to Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Me being someone who did not love Fourth Wing, I did think the sequel was significantly better, despite popular opinion. I don't know why, but I felt like in this book, the story was finally becoming its own, whereas Fourth Wing reminded me a lot of different fantasy books that I had already read. The romance in this one though, yeah, I agree with all the flaws everyone has about this book, but again, I did like it better than the first one, so I'm interested to see where the story is gonna go from here.
Up next, I have All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Y'all are so tired of hearing me talk about this one, and I'm so sorry, but this is the last time I'll have to talk about it. It was pretty disappointing to me, I think only because the writing was honestly hard for me to understand and connect with, but I can understand how so many people did love this story, and I still need to watch the adaptation.
So up next, I have the last two books that I needed to read in the Off-Campus and Briar U series by Elle Kennedy, The Dare and the Legacy. This entire series is like a sports hockey romance. They all go to the same college, and each book in the series follows a different couple. In The Dare, it was like the new hockey player boy and a outcast sorority girl. They had to make a dare, and there was a little bit of fake dating. And The Legacy was just a sequel book to the Off-Campus series. It's like a Where Are They Now for our original four couples. I gave both of these like a 3-star because I thought they were okay. I am happy to be done with the series though.
Up next, I do have my favorite romance book of this year, and it was The Right Move by Liz Tomfordy. So good. I gave it 4.75 for no reason. It should have been a 5-star read for me. I just really can't get enough of this author's writing. She really has me like kicking and screaming and feeling so giddy, which is exactly what I want in a romance book. And I think it's crazy that I have such a hard time finding romance books like that. It's like each book in the series just keeps getting better and better, so I can't wait to read Caught Up and her next book, Play Along, next year.
Up next, I have one of my new favorite books of all time. I should have given it a higher rating. It is Circe by Madeline Miller. Every time I talk about this book, I reminisce on the story. This book is an adaptation of Greek myths told in the perspective of Circe the witch. So it's basically just following her life, and we're seeing these big things happen throughout her life, but in her perspective. It is not a romance story like the Song of Achilles, but it still packs the same punch. It's beautifully written. Madeline Miller, she's This is sorcery. I don't know how she does it, but the way that she writes is so captivating. I can't wait to read her new book. I heard she's doing a story on like Persephone, which I'm just so excited for. But yes, this was such an amazing book. Even if you're not into Greek mythology, I think you would enjoy it. It's one of those stories that's like heartbreaking, but also beautiful.
Up next, we do have Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This was a very popular low-stakes fantasy this year. We've said it so many times. I think we just need higher stakes in fantasy books. I definitely enjoyed it, but it was lacking just a little bit of
Stakes?
stakes and needed the stakes. Good story, good characters. We were just expecting a little bit more.
So now I'm getting into my December books. We did just go in depth on these books in our December wrap up, but to kind of go over them again, I started off the month with Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh. In this book, we're following Eileen, and the whole book takes place 7 days before Christmas. So each chapter is a different day. She is kind of an unhinged, gross character to read about, but that makes her really relatable. She ends up meeting this woman and becomes a little bit obsessed, and then things start getting crazy. I thought this book was like charming, a little bit disturbing. I do want to watch the movie adaptation.
Up next, I do have 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. Y'all know we love Holly Jackson. In this one, we're following 6 friends who are on their way to spring break vacation, and only 5 of them survive. If it's one thing Miss Holly Jackson is gonna do, is she's gonna get you with those plot twists. And she definitely did that at the end. With this book for me, it was a crazy ride, super entertaining. The setting all takes place in the same like 8 hours of the day, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna like that, but I actually really enjoyed it.
Up next, we have The Plight Before Christmas by Kate Stewart. This was a fun holiday rom-com. It was funny, it was dramatic. We're basically following a girl. She goes on her holiday vacation with her family, and her brother unknowingly invites her ex to stay with them. That's kind of the setup. It was really fun. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sending me this book. I had a really fun time with it this year.
Up next, I do have The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Honestly, this probably was my least favorite book from them. I really liked the concept, really liked the idea of this romance, but I just felt like the relationship was a little bit forced. Love Christina Lauren, but this is my least favorite.
Up next, we have Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. This was our current book club book, and we really enjoyed it. It was another holiday rom-com. It was friends to lovers, fake dating. It took place on a Christmas tree farm, so it was all the right vibes for this time of year. I thought it was really cute, and I know we want to continue with the series.
I mean, these covers are everything, so I think we have to continue on with the series, so they look so good on our shelves. Up next, I do have All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. I did read The Wall of Winnipeg in Me a long time ago, and I didn't enjoy it, so I read this one to kind of give Mariana Zapata a second chance for me. I did enjoy it more than The Wall of Winnipeg in Me. I did end up giving it a 3.5. I loved the small town setting. I loved all the characters, but again, I just wasn't rooting for the romance.
Up next, I have The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is super hyped for a reason. It's a devastating story about Esther as she's battling with mental health in 1950s America. It wasn't at all what I was expecting, but it was so good. It feels and reads so modern, but it was just like a beautiful, devastating story. And then when you find out more about this author, it makes the whole thing more sad. But I think it was a really important read. I can't believe I took so long to read it.
I did read Killer Instinct and All In. I just love these characters so much. I mean, the series is going really well. I'm gonna be really sad when I have to say goodbye to them. All In ended on such a cliffhanger that I'm so ready to read that last book next year.
Keeping on with the modern classics, I have We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. My first Shirley Jackson book, and it was incredible. It was gothic, it was eerie, and there was so many different layers in the writing. In this story, we're following 2 sisters that live on the outskirts of town after most of their family has passed away. A lot of the townspeople think one of them is responsible, so they're treated really differently, and things just get worse and worse for these 2. There's so many hidden meanings and messages in this story. I do think I would reread it at some point, and I can't wait to read more of Shirley Jackson. I do want to read Haunting of Hill House because I know it's such a big one.
I love that show. Up next, I do have The Last Legacy by Adrienne Young. We love Adrienne Young. She writes such good YA fantasy books. I loved reading about Bryn and seeing her navigate her way through her crazy family. This was just a really good book, and I can't wait to read more from Adrienne Young.
Up next, I have The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This was everything. I said it in the wrap-up. I wish this was required reading when we were in school or even now. It's just such an important, inspirational book. We're following the shepherd boy as he travels to go see the pyramids in Egypt to find a treasure that he keeps dreaming about. And throughout his journey, he's faced with obstacles he has to overcome. And throughout that, he learns valuable life lessons, as did I. There's so many good quotes that I highlighted, so many good scenes, so many double meanings. This was just a really amazing one. This was my last 5-star read of the year.
Up next, I do have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I actually really enjoyed this one, and I didn't think I was going to because so many people loved it. I loved the magical time traveling storytelling aspect of the book. The romance was super sweet and genuine, and I'm ready to read another romance book from this author.
So up next, I read a tiny little Stephen King book, and it was called Elevation. Something about his tiny books just do it for me. I don't know what it is. I thought this was gonna be like a sci-fi read. It was so much more than that. We're following this man. He has a mysterious affliction, and it ends up bringing this town closer together. I don't want to give too much away. It was so heartfelt and wholesome, and the overall message I love. It was just not at all what I was expecting. It's a little bit weird, but it was perfect. It takes place in Castle Rock, and I feel like this is one that I don't ever hear about, but I'm so glad I read it. I gave it 4 stars.
Up next, I do have Some Kind of Perfect by Krista and Becca Ritchie. Finally finished the series. Can't believe it took me this long to do it. It was so bittersweet to say goodbye to these characters, but it was also really nice seeing how far they've come from the very beginning to now. But I am ready to just retire this series and sit it up on my shelf.
So the last book I read in 2023 was this short little horror novel, and it is called Come Closer by Sarah Gran. I just recently got this book too. It's essentially about a woman. We're watching her live her day-to-day life, and she may or may not be getting possessed by a demon. It's a little spooky. Like I said earlier with the Grady Hendrix books, something about possessions just make me sad. So I don't think it's gonna be something I'm gonna continue to read about because I can't enjoy the story. It is kind of like a interesting thing to watch unfold, but I'm just sad the whole time. So I kind of felt empty after reading this book. I only gave it 3 stars, but it was a really quick one that helped me reach my reading goal.
And the last one I have today is The Light We Lost. I do have the copy somewhere. I just had it. I don't know where it is, but that's okay. We'll do a pop-up. This was such a real and raw romance story. It was essentially just 2 people who were each other's first love, and they just can't get over each other. And it was really sad because we just see like their lives move on and they still can't stop thinking about each other. And it just made me sad like the whole time. The ending was really crazy and I didn't see it coming, but I think it just made it more real. It was a great story, and I will be reading more from this author.
Okay, you guys, that was every single book we read this year. At least half of it. The rest was in part 1, but this was a lot.
Looking at it, it doesn't seem like a lot, but this is a lot.
It is. I'm proud of us.
Me too.
95 books? Okay, 96, but basically 95 books a piece is insane. Who would have thought?
Not me.
Overall, it's been such a great reading year. We found so many new favorites. I can't wait to see what the new year brings. We have some exciting videos coming out next week, but until then, make sure to join our book club if you haven't already. We are voting for what we're reading in January, so make sure to check that out. That link is in the description. Also, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. We hope you guys have a great new year, and we will see you guys soon.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear it? We're so far from the camera.
We're like so close that I can't.
I know. I can't look at you. I'm like,
It's like not even natural for us to sit this close.
I know.
My mom said we're ordering Roadhouse. What do y'all want?
Just a whole 12 count of rolls.
Same. This hurts.
I'm uncomfy. It was just like a little. Tell me I got a paper cut. Tell me I got a paper cut right now.
Oh my gosh.
But overall. Whoa! Over the wall.
I remember being so content with. Oh my god. I remember being so content with the 3.5, and then there was like a final twist that really got me, so I gave it a 3.75.
Ooh.
Another STEM romance from Allie Hazelwood, and honestly, I did enjoy The Love Hypothesis more than this one. I feel like in this story, we got a whole bunch of scientific information.
I don't remember you reading this one. What is this one about?
And this one we're following Vanessa, who is a travel vlogger.
Is that too close to you if I say like that? And what else? What's another word for that? Like, how would you... Toxic? That's not toxic. What? What was that?
And I can definitely say I did not enjoy this one as much as I...
I thought you that was it. You just did not enjoy this one. This was a really highly rated book out of all of mine this year. Where am I looking? I've been avoiding the light. I'm literally like... I know that clip is gonna be ridiculous. I was looking all kinds of places.
It helped me get a lot of background information that I felt like I didn't have. What?
Oh, these books are so good, dude. These are so good. I wish I could read it again. Okay.
I was surprised too that the book and the movie are pretty different. It's like the same storyline, but not.
Oh.